Crossing borders for the first time is like ripping off a plaster. It's messy, nerve-wracking, and you have no idea what the fuck is going on. And then add in a case of food poisoning when you arrive. My first destination in Guatemala was Panajachel. It was absolutely unforgettable, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to another episode of the Amelie Moran podcast. Today, we're talking about Panajachel, moving on to Guatemala, which I'm so excited about. Guatemala was one of my favorite countries that we went to on our entire trip. I'm going to tell you about our first land border crossing from Mexico to Guatemala. Also going to tell you about the time that Sam and I got the worst food poisoning on the first day that we arrived, and everything I've learned about this lakeside town. I'm going to talk about culture, food, safety, and what makes it worth it, even if you're not sick. Okay, so let's start from the top. I will set the scene. We are in San Cristobal in Mexico. Sam and I have no clue what to expect from this day because this is our first land border crossing, and I always feel like the first one is going to be so much more nerve-wracking because once you've done it a few times, you just get into the routine of it, understand what's needed of you. But we had no idea what to expect. It's 5:45 a.m. Our van is coming at 6 a.m. to take us to Guatemala. We didn't realize that there are forms you need to fill out to get into Guatemala from Mexico. Specific immigration forms. They actually become quite basic once you've done this a few times. You just have to sort of state who you are and like what you're doing in the country. Basically just telling them why you're in the country. When I was writing this episode and thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I suddenly remembered that everybody was holding these pieces of paper whilst we were in our hostel waiting for our van. We were thinking, why does everyone seem to have these pieces of paper and we have no clue what they are and what they're for? But like, it was uniform. Everybody was holding them. We asked the front desk, we had to scan this code, fill out the immigration form online. It was completely fine. It was all good. The van arrives and we get in. We put our bags in the boot and suddenly we are on this van with complete strangers. There was actually a family that were traveling, which I thought was absolutely insane. There were these two small kids with their parents traveling, crossing the border into Guatemala. They were so well behaved the whole time, like I have to say. But Sam and I were like in absolute awe that these parents could do this because they were young, like being entertained by toys, had a few films on the iPad for the journey. And this is like a 12-hour journey, the full day. So yeah, I was pretty impressed. But we're driving, and an hour before the border, we stop at this cafe. We're all grabbing coffees, sandwiches, just a bit of fuel. We haven't really had time to have breakfast. The hostel didn't give us breakfast because we had such an early set off. Sam and I grab a coffee. We're chilling, we think everything's fine. Suddenly this American girl that has been traveling with us in our van starts freaking out. And I mean like full-blown panic attack. And Sam and I thinking, calm the fuck down. Like, what the fuck is going on? She hasn't filled in these immigration forms and you can't cross the border without them. She is like freaking out, like crying, just like sits on the floor and is just in full like panic mode, rocking back and forth. She also can't log on to the website that you need to get these forms because we are in the middle of absolute nowhere. This cafe is like a random pop-up, it feels like. And I think she also said it was something to do with her US data, like it was blocking the website or like she didn't have data. I can't remember what it was, but like we are in the middle of nowhere. So access to internet is very, very scarce. But the weird thing was this cafe has a printer, which now makes sense because people would then go to this cafe before the border so you can print off all of your forms or like whatever you need. But there was no computer from what I remember. Like there wasn't like a computer that you could log on to print off some stuff. It was just like a Bluetooth printer in the middle of this cafe in the middle of nowhere. And you just had to airdrop it to this printer and it would print out whatever you needed. It was honestly completely random, but we're all sort of gathering together, the rest of us that are traveling in our van. We're all kind of discussing like, what do we do? Like, what is she gonna do? Because we're 6 hours away-ish from San Cristobal, where we were before, like where we were picked up. So what the hell is she gonna do? Because we can't exactly just turn around, drop her off. But then also, do you leave her at the border? Like, what do you, like, being genuinely curious, what do you do? Eventually, she got the form sorted and she was fine. I don't know how she did it or how she sort of figured it out or whatever, but she was completely fine and the panic was over. We all get back in the van and we drive to the first checkpoint with the border police. I feel like it's common sense and common knowledge, but just to reiterate it, when you are leaving a country, especially through a land border, you have to get a stamp in your passport to say that you are leaving that country. You could get into some serious trouble or issues with immigration if you do not get these stamps. You need your stamp saying you're out of a certain country and stamp that you're in a certain country. This is so vitally important. The forms were fine being on our phone, so when I was stressing about all these people having like printed out forms and stuff, it was completely fine on our phone. So that's a tip. If you can't find a printer or have no access to one, don't bother paying for one and getting stuff printed out, just not worth it. You can do it on your phone. But we now had our stamp to say that we are officially out of Mexico. And then we drove to the physical border and got our stamp to say we're in Guatemala. A really good tip, I think, for when you're crossing these land borders is to exchange your money there. When you've crossed into Guatemala, there are so many people standing there with quetzales, which is the currency that Guatemala uses, and you can exchange your pesos into quetzales. I feel like it's a better way to go rather than going to a sort of traditional like money exchange shop or something. We got a much better rate and you're also able to negotiate. I left all of that sort of up to Sam because he's so much better at negotiating than I am. I will definitely like just be like, okay, I don't want any awkwardness, like give me whatever. But Sam is really good at being like, no, this is what we want. But you can't really do that obviously at the shops or like the traditional money exchange shops. I think for us, we even tried to negotiate how many pesos we had, exchange them. And the guy said no to the deal we were trying to get. And we just said, okay, that's fine. Like we'll do it once we get into Panajachel. He actually came back up to us after about 10 minutes and said, yeah, okay, I'll do your deal. That's fine. So it's a much freer kind of experience and then also makes you feel a bit better because you're now entering the country with currency. If you need to pay for anything or if you want to buy any snacks on the way, anything, then you've got the currency you're needing. But we changed vans at the border. We were now getting into a different car. And when I'm saying van, by the way, it's like a transit van. It's like if you do a tour, maybe it's like a 14-seater type van, not necessarily that spacious. Sam and I sat at the very back because that was technically the most spacious. We sort of had like 2 seats to ourselves, which was quite nice. But what made me laugh about this specific van was that instead of putting all of our bags in the boot, the guy is climbing up on the roof of this van and saying to us like, give me your bags, like chuck up your bags. And he's just strapping them to the roof with a piece of rope, which I can't say I've ever experienced before. And Sam and I weren't necessarily worried because we could watch him strap in our bags. But it was just a very strange experience to think that, like, if our bag falls off, then our bag falls off. There's not really much we can do about it. We're going to be driving on motorways all the way to Panajachel now. So it was a very interesting experience, but definitely gave you the backpacker feel of, like, roughing it or, I don't know, doing things a bit differently than traditional ways of traveling. So we quite liked it, but it was definitely very strange to us. It also meant that if you needed anything out of your big bag, you just weren't getting it for the next whatever 6 hours. It just wasn't going to happen. And before we know it, we're driving through Guatemala, we're taking in the scenery, and we're heading to Panajachel. I do have to say that as soon as you cross into Guatemala, you can feel that you are in a different country. It is a completely different vibe. I would say it's like so much more colorful than we found Mexico. Just the scenery is beautiful. The markets are so colorful as well. And the border itself is this like massive market that everybody's walking around and kind of crossing in and out of Mexico and Guatemala quite freely because they're locals and like that's the town they live in. The sunsets and sunrises in Guatemala as well were some of the most beautiful, especially in Panajachel because you've got all the volcanoes and mountains surrounding you. Honestly, like pink skies every night was so gorgeous. The town itself, I would say, of Panajachel is quite touristy. Like it's very busy. You've got loads of restaurants, markets, bars. Like you basically have everything you need. Panajachel is a very colorful place. We couldn't really see the lake at night. We arrived just after sunset. But one thing you can do is walk through to the ends of the markets, like the main strip. And there's a pier and you can see sort of the silhouette of all of the volcanoes. And you can even see the lights of the different villages around the lake, which we thought was really cool. Our hostel was extremely ideal. I won't say it was anything fancy. It was honestly just a bed in a room, but it was perfect. They did shuttles and buses and like travel arrangements for excursions or other parts of Guatemala as well, which we didn't know when we booked it. But that is such a blessing in disguise. I've kind of spoken about this before, but like if you can get a hostel, which most hostels will do this anyway, but if you can get a hostel that is going to arrange all your travel and help you with that, it's so ideal, because then also you have this line of communication and someone that you can speak to about your travel arrangements. I'll talk about it when we've done it, but when we've not done it through a hostel, it can be very, very stressful and you don't really know. We didn't really have a great experience, but that is a story for another time. Our hostel owner was also so lovely and he was so helpful. Didn't really speak any English, so I was really exercising my Spanish, but honestly really kind and gave us really good ideas of what there is to do in Panajachel. We didn't have an aircon in our room, just fans, but like that is maybe the only thing I could say that about our hostel that wasn't ideal, but it wasn't necessarily like boiling hot. It just would have been nicer to have aircon, but to be honest, it's like, that's just a luxury at that point. I almost did burn our hostel down. I've debated telling this story because I'm quite embarrassed by it, but Sam and I were sitting outside one night, just playing Monopoly Deal, out in our outside area. Outside our room was like a balcony style, kind of almost like a mezzanine in a way as well. You had loads of plants everywhere. It was kind of like a mini jungle in a way. We were sitting outside playing Monopoly Deal and we sat there for a few hours, just chatting, admiring the views. It was a really, really nice evening, very peaceful evening. And there was a candle on our table, which had been lit by the hostel owner previously when we'd been out. So when we are ready to go to bed, I am trying to blow out this candle and it won't go out because I'm thinking I don't want to leave it burning just in case it does like catch something on fire. I don't want that to be our responsibility. This candle is not blowing out, so I just pour the tiniest bit of water. This is not a big candle. Tiniest bit of water from my water bottle onto the candle, thinking this is going to dead it off, drown the flame, we'll be fine, can go to bed. That's not what happened. I didn't realize that this was an oil candle. Everything went up in flames, like big, big flames. And there was this wooden ornament above where we were sitting, like dangling down. And the flames touch it, and it looks like it's going to be set on fire. My hair almost caught on fire as well, which would not have been ideal, but to be honest, would have been the least of our worries at that point. And it made the biggest sound. The only way I can describe it is like a sparkler or something, but on steroids. Like the sound that sparklers make when you light them and they're, sparkling. It was like that, but so much louder, so much bigger. And bearing in mind there are other people staying in this hostel, and I was very conscious, please do not come out of your room right now because this is extremely embarrassing and I almost have burnt the entire place down. I don't know what led us to then just leave it, but for some reason we left it and it was fine in the morning. We came out and nothing had been burnt down. Yeah, it was a very awkward situation that I was praying the hostel owner didn't see or figure out. Everything was fine in the end. Let's just leave it at that. But anyway, my first impression of Panajachel was that it's a very cool and vibrant town, so much color, so many things to do as well. To give you a bit of context, Panajachel is one of the villages around Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. The lake itself is a volcanic crater lake surrounded by indigenous Mayan villages, and it's considered one of the most beautiful lakes in the world. I'm not surprised by that. Every village, from what I understand, has very different vibes. Like Panajachel is known for its artisan crafts, its markets, and its kind of laid back nature. Other villages around the lake might be like known for backpacking and partying, or one might be like for yoga and the kind of spiritualness or something. So every village is completely different. You can travel between these villages as well, actually on the lake, which we thought was quite cool. You can get a boat that is extremely cheap and it will take you to each village, whichever one you want. The only thing I will say is I remember the boat rides being very long. It's like a whole day trip to kind of go and do this. I wouldn't say it's like an afternoon. If you really want to explore the villages, it's not like an afternoon activity. I would like dedicate time to go and see each one. You can also swim in some points of the lake, but from what we were told, Panajachel is not the best. I think it's quite dirty. And to be honest, I wouldn't recommend swimming anywhere in the lake that people don't recommend, because we did speak to some people and they got ear infections and like their hair got ruined or something, and it just isn't something you want to deal with whilst you're traveling, especially if you're putting your head under the water. So I think you can swim, you just might want to be conscious of putting your head under, or like going in with any open cuts or like recent injuries. And when I was doing some research, I found out that the lake has a legend, which we didn't know at the time, but apparently the locals say that it's haunted by spirits. There have been stories of whirlpools swallowing up entire boats. This really doesn't surprise me, because I feel like the communities surrounding the lake are very spiritual. They're Mayan communities, indigenous communities, and spirituality is a very big part of those communities. So I honestly believe it. Wouldn't put it past it. Fair enough. I didn't go in the lake, so I was fine. But something that is outside of Panajachel is the Chichicastenango market, which is actually the biggest market in Central America. The only way I can give you context of how big this market is that we were picked up by a tour guide or driver, taken to this market, and we were dropped there at maybe like 9 a.m., 10 a.m. We were given 5 hours to explore this market, because you need 5 hours to even understand where the hell you are, what you have and haven't done, and just go through every single street of this market. It had absolutely everything there. Like, you had all these crafts, you had loads of homemade stuff, you had clothing, food, meat, veg, like everything. I even got these trousers there, which is why I'm wearing them, and they are some of my favorite, comfiest trousers. I got some rings that I'm wearing, if you can see them. I got them as well from the market, and it was so fun. It's like such a fun environment, because everybody's negotiating. You're also admiring what people are selling. There are some stands that are even just people doing like an attic clear out, and they will just have random shit out. There's like no theme to their stand. It's just everything. We saw some like 1990s, 2000s TVs, like the big, thick old TVs. So many random things, random trinkets you could buy, and it was absolutely insane. And lastly, something to do, which we didn't actually do, but is hiking around the volcanoes surrounding Lake Atitlan, or just going and chilling by the lake. You can sunbathe there. There are spots there. There's bars, restaurants on the front. Moving on to my introduction into Guatemalan food. Sam and I got really, really bad food poisoning the first night that we were here. Even though the lake is famous for its fresh lake fish, famous for its tamales, empanadas, tostadas, Sam and I made the mistake of going for a wander the first night that we arrived. We had been traveling all day, and we just came upon the first street cart that we found, and they were selling hot dogs. And I wasn't too hungry at the time, so I was like, fine, I'll just get a hot dog, something small. I know this food as well, so like it should be fine, or go down fine. It was an interesting hot dog, like the palest one I've ever seen, maybe. Also, I don't know if anyone else gets this, but I have found that it is such an ick of mine. I understand when you make hot dogs at home, you can boil them. Like if you buy frankfurters from the shops, you can boil them in a pan and then they're ready, and you just take them out of the water and that's it. But it was something about this street food stand. This guy took the hot dogs out of this lukewarm water, and it was dripping, like dripping, put it on a stale bun, and just gave me no toppings, no sauces, nothing. I just got such the ick from it. I just was like, what the fuck? It was absolutely soaking. The bread was wet. And I've realized that it's just an ick of mine, seeing hot dogs come out of the water, especially when it was lukewarm. It just, something about it was like, ugh, no, not for me. But I ate it nonetheless. I did find some ketchup round the corner from his stand, but it was completely empty, so I got what I could out of it. I did eat it, and it tasted fine, a bit bland, whatever. It's a hot dog, I thought, no issue. After that, Sam spots this other street cart that so many locals are eating at. They had like a whole seating area just next to their street cart, and they're grilling loads of chicken. They've even got some empanadas on the grill or something. Like, there's so much food there, and so many locals are eating there. And it kind of became this thing that Sam and I had said to each other before traveling, that if we see locals eating at these street stands, because if the locals are eating there, then it's clearly popular, clearly nice food, and our stomachs should be fine. Anyway, we go and sit at this local street stand, and Sam orders a chicken fillet or like a chicken steak type of deal, and he starts to eat it, gives me a tiny piece, like maybe a quarter less than, and we suddenly notice that there are parts of it that are slightly pink. But I swear it's a thing where sometimes your chicken can appear pink, but it is completely cooked. So we didn't really think anything of it. We were a bit iffy about it, not really sure whether to trust it, but I thought it was fine. I mean, I didn't eat that much of it, but Sam ate basically all of it. And this turned into food poisoning to the point where we didn't leave our bed for a few days. And it was very interesting because the first day after that, Sam woke up feeling so ill and kept saying, like, this has not agreed with my stomach. And I felt completely fine. I was going to the shops to get him some electrolyte drinks and get us some water, get us some dry snacks or something. And then my food poisoning kicked in the day later and I was not well. And I won't go into detail, but to give you an idea, it was not pretty. It was just quite horrible, to be honest. We extended our stay because we wanted to give ourselves a chance to actually go and see the lake, because bearing in mind, we'd been there a few days at this point. We had still not seen the lake in the daytime because we could not move. So we went to our hostel owner, said, can we extend? He said, yeah, that's fine. Changed our bus to our next destination, and that was all completely fine. But even after a few days, I still was not feeling well at all. Sam was feeling better, and he went for a walk and actually had to take a video of the lake for me because it wasn't looking like I was going to get out of bed before we left, and I probably wasn't going to see the lake in the daytime. We also then obviously became very cautious of what we ate there. So I can't say too much about eating authentic Guatemalan food. We kind of just ended up eating a lot of bread, a lot of dry cereal, to be honest, some pizzas, because to us that just felt safe. Everyone obviously also goes on about Guatemalan coffee, which I can't say we tried at this place in Guatemala, but I will say for future reference, Guatemalan coffee is so nice. One of the best, I have to say. This food poisoning also carried on into our next destination, which I will obviously talk about when that episode comes out. So yeah, I will leave the food section there because not much else to say. But from what I've understood and researched and obviously had after being in Panajachel, Guatemalan food is really, really good and really, really nice. I think we just got unlucky. Now talking about safety in Panajachel, I don't have too much to say, if I'm completely honest, because I didn't really leave my bed. Panajachel is very safe for travelers. It's relatively safe. There are obviously things like pickpocketing and stuff, but I feel like that happens anywhere. I wouldn't say that's completely due to being in Panajachel. There are also taxis and tuk-tuks that you can get for transport, getting to different villages around the lake, or if you are on a night out and you need to go back to your hostel, there's always going to be transport available to you, which we thought was really nice. Then there are the chicken buses, which someone correct me if I'm completely wrong about this interpretation of them, but the chicken buses are old American school buses that have been converted into, I guess, like local buses. They're really decorated and they look fucking amazing. They look so cool going through the streets of Panajachel, especially. But from what we were told by our hostel owner, we're not the type of people that should be getting on those chicken buses because people jump on and off so quickly that you can get easily robbed. He also told us stories of the buses actually being stopped by people who are going to rob everybody on board. So I feel like when you go on one of those buses, maybe do it with precaution, but correct me if I'm wrong, like maybe they're really safe, but we just avoided them because we had other modes of transport available to us and also we were just a bit nervous about it. They also emit so much pollution. When they drive past you, you have to hold your breath because the black smoke just lingers in the air. And that was another reason we didn't travel on them, because it just felt quite dirty and quite gross. And we're not relatively picky about that kind of stuff, but when you're walking in the street and the black smoke just like takes over, it wasn't very nice. But apart from that, I really don't have much to say about the safety. I would say it's relatively safe. It is a backpacker's destination. You do have tourists there who are there on holiday, so you're always going to be surrounded by people when you're out and about. So I think it would be fine if you were going as a solo traveler. Now time for the Amelie Moran ranking system. Okay, so food and drink, I have to say 5 out of 10. I got unlucky, but I barely ate anything, and anything I did eat just wasn't agreeing with me. Nightlife, I said 8 out of 10 because it's always busy, so many people about, like I've said. History and culture, 9 out of 10, so much to do there. Accessibility and English level, I've said 7 out of 10 because the accessibility was really good. The transport options were really good, but I would say that English is maybe not as approachable here. We were told before going to Guatemala that English is maybe less spoken, even though there is obviously a lot of tourism in Guatemala. If you know basic phrases in Spanish, I think you'll be fine. If you speak no Spanish, you might struggle to communicate a bit. So I've said 7 out of 10. Safety, 8 out of 10. And expenses, 8 out of 10. I think that Panajachel was a bit cheaper than Mexico. Not by miles necessarily, but I think if you are looking for a budget-friendly destination where you can also have loads of things to do that are also relatively cheap, I would say that going to Lake Atitlan in general is definitely one of the best places to keep your trip budget-friendly. And overall, I've said 7 out of 10 for Panajachel. I really did enjoy what I could of Panajachel, but obviously my experience was tainted slightly from being very, very ill during this time. So that is my tea on Panajachel and my time there. It wasn't what I imagined. To be honest, it makes for good stories and it's quite funny looking back on it now, but I can definitely tell you at the time it was not funny at all. If you have any food poisoning horror stories from when you were traveling, please let me know because I would love to hear all about them. You can email me or DM me, whichever is easier. And don't forget to subscribe and like this episode. It means so much. But I will see you in the next episode of the Amelie Moran podcast. Bye.